Oh, welcome, welcome to Glen Coe. If you haven't guessed from that famous mountain behind me, and I'm heading up there, hopefully tomorrow. But what I'm hoping to tell you is a story about a witch, and the reason that I got onto that is if you type into Google most haunted locations in Scotland, not that I do that often, but Glencoe always seems to come up. But apart from the story that I'm going to tell you, there's not that much that I usually see about spectres and ghosts from Glencoe. But there is a story about a witch, which I'll come on to. But to give that a bit of background, I have to tell you a wee bit about the story that everyone knows about Glencoe, or thinks they know about Glencoe, which is the Glencoe Massacre. And the Glencoe Massacre, yeah, that's a book of Let If More behind me, by the way. But yeah, a quick, I'm no expert on history. I might have taken more interest in history if we got taught the Scottish and Clan and Highland history at school, but we didn't. But anyway, a very quick synopsis of what happened at the Glencoe Massacre. Most people think it was the MacDonalds or the Campbells massacring the MacDonalds. So the MacDonalds were based, they lived in Glencoe. And apparently it wasn't just in the Glencoe village at the time, which was 1692, there was lots of different townships, and the MacDonalds were spread across all these different townships in Glencoe. There was a new king, King William. He was married to Mary. I think Mary's father was actually James VII, who had been deposed and was in exile in France. And anyway, most of the clans in the Clan MacDonald had pledged allegiance to King James. Maybe something to do with Catholicism and Protestant. I don't know. Go and check out another history page. But anyway, King William and the government, the Scottish government, were trying to impose. They didn't want uprisings like what had happened at Killiecrankie, and apparently MacIan, who was the boss of Clan MacDonald in Glencoe, had been present at Killiecrankie. Anyway, they wanted to impose some rule, and they basically wanted all the clans to pledge their allegiance to the new king, King William. So, long story short, is they wanted to make sure King James was happy with that first. They did that, and the deadline for pledging this allegiance was the end of the year, December the 31st. And MacDonald, or MacIan, who was the clan chief, had got the okay to do this from James on something like the 28th, which didn't leave much time. So he then went up to Fort William. Remember, none of these roads were here. He went up to Fort William. I think there was a barracks up there, a Colonel Hill, I think, to sign his oath to say that he'd pledged his allegiance. But the people up at Fort William didn't have the jurisdiction to accept it, so they said you need to go down to Inveraray, I think, about 60 miles to the south anyway, and you can imagine on a pony or by foot that would take a long time. So he got down there, they were all having Hogmanay celebrations, and he didn't get it in time. I think it was around about the 5th or 6th that he basically put his pledge in. Anyway, he got it in, but it was late. But that was enough to annoy King William, and they thought they'll make an example of the MacDonalds. They were quite an unruly clan, apparently. So the story goes, which most people know, the clan, it wasn't the Clan Campbell, it was the government forces who had Campbells in them. The Campbells and the MacDonalds never got on, but it was the government forces came up, and I think the start of February, they basically came into into Glencoe and the settlements, and the MacDonalds took them in. And this was partly to do with the Highland hospitality. You always open your door and give somebody a bed to sleep in and feed them and what have you. But also it was a way for them to pay their taxes in kind, because they hadn't been paying their taxes, and by offering them shelter and food, that was one way to do it. So again, long story short, the forces were basically for about 2 weeks in the houses of the MacDonalds. They were feeding them, they were partying with them, playing cards, all this sort of stuff. And on the 12th of February, the order was given to slaughter. It was a massacre, genocide, to get rid of as many as possible. And at 5 a.m. in the morning, the government forces basically came down on the MacDonalds and tried to wipe them out. So yeah, I think it was the 12th of February, 5 o'clock in the morning, the forces came down and basically killed women, children, men. I think the order was to basically leave no one under the age of 70 alive. And apparently they'd chosen the MacDonalds because one, they were quite rebellious and a right thorn in the side for many years. And also the location, Glen Coe, it's quite a narrow glen, and they were going to block up this end here. Actually, just over here is a Devil's Staircase. There was meant to be government troops blocking the exit that way and also down towards the west. And as far as I can tell from the reading that I've done, the troops that appeared to block the glen came in late, which allowed a lot of the MacDonalds to get away. So out of the maybe, 400 people that lived in the glen, there was 38 officially killed or massacred. But a lot of them got away. Now, that isn't the end of the story, because the ones that got away fled to the mountains and the hills around us here, these ones here, and it was February, and they reckon, I don't know, maybe another 50 to 100 died, succumbed to the elements as they tried to escape to neighbouring clans over in Appin and up into the hills. A pretty gruesome thing to do. There are some stories the government troops weren't all as barbaric as it is made out. Some of them pre-warned some of the MacDonalds the night before and told them not to be around, and there's also recollections of them, some lieutenants refusing to carry out the orders. But anyway, that's by the by. That's my brief history of the Glencoe Massacre. There's lots of other amazing YouTube channels and history web pages out there that'll explain it a lot better, and if I've got anything wrong, I do apologise. I'm definitely not a history buff, but that is the backdrop to the story I want to tell you. I'll probably tell you it tomorrow as I'm going up the hill, because there's a story about a witch, and apparently she went and spent a lot of time in the hills and mountains of Glen Coe, and it's quite interesting. So we're back to the van just now, and I'm going to get some tea, and I might see you back at the van, or I might see you in the morning as I'm heading towards this Monroe. It's looking quite nice now though, but yeah, I'll speak to you in a wee while. So I settled down for the night, and I didn't look outside in case I saw any ghosts of the clansmen hiding amongst the rocks. Sometimes there are accounts of this happening. Anyway, I set the time lapse up, and you could see the comet Shushan Atlas in the sky. And in the past, the sight of a comet in the sky was meant to be a harbinger of doom, the best example being 1066 before the Battle of Hastings and King Harold's death. But yeah. Anyway, that relates quite nicely to the story that I'm about to tell the following day, because there's a few prophecies and foresights that get told in that tale. Right, good morning. It's still pretty dark. There's a wee bit of light coming in to the sky behind me, but I've been going for about 40 minutes now, and I've not done a bit to camera, and I'm not going to talk about what I'm going to talk about until there's light in the sky. You know when you get that feeling you're being followed. And yeah, I've been given the spooks a few times coming in, so I don't want to give myself the heebie-jeebies anymore, so let's wait till there's a bit more light in the sky, and I'll come back on to talking what I was talking about. But anyway, I'm going up this hill. You'll not see it behind me because the camera doesn't fit it all in, but it's a Monroe. I've never been up this way before. I'm in an offshoot glen from Glen Coe called the Larry Garton, and really looking forward to this. So let's see if I can find the path that I've never been on before, which takes me up to the Bealach, and then hopefully there'll be a bit more light in the sky, and I'll be able to tell you a bit more about these spooky stories. Right, let's go. Oh, right. Well, we're just about at sunrise, and what height am I at? But just under 700 metres. I'm not far from the Bealach. It's been quite a nice ascent up this way because I've been out of the wind, and that's one of the reasons I chose to come here. But anyway, I feel like it's safe now to tell the story about the witch, or she might not have been a witch. Sometimes they were called wise women, and wise women had the same powers apparently, but did good things. And certainly the story that I'm going to tell you is her trying to do a good thing. But her name was Corrag, and she lived in the mountains above Glen Coe, round about here, and is said still to roam these hills in her spiritual form, terrorising unsuspecting hill walkers. Okay, I'm not sure if that bit's true, but anyway, she was apparently a woman who lived in the hills above Glen Coe, and there's a number of prophecies that I'll tell you about. There are some accounts that she was unnamed, bad and evil, but certainly the story that I'll tell you doesn't relate to that, so, or it doesn't seem to add up to her being too bad. But yeah, I will go on a wee bit further. I think I'm going to have to get my jacket on shortly, and I'm going to get a drink of water. So I'll bring you back at the Bealach, which is probably a few hundred metres behind you. So let's crack on, and I'll bring you back in a wee while. So I headed up as light started to fill the sky, and the final slopes getting up towards the Bealach steepened up considerably, and the path disappeared. But before long, I was reaching the flattened ground of the Bealach. Oh, I can see the Bealach now. Bring you back there. You not see, but behind us is the mountain we're going up. But I need to get a drink of water, so I'm going to stop here and get a wee drink. Oh, so the story of Corrag and the massacre. So she'd actually been a prophecy. She'd prophesied, that's what I'm looking for, the massacre. She'd gone and told McKean, who was the clan leader, that the redcoats were coming and the government troops were going to wipe them out and there's something really bad going to happen. And they didn't believe her. They dismissed it and didn't do anything about it. So when it came to the night of the 12th, the day before the massacre, which I think was the 13th, I might have said it was the 12th before, but anyway, the 13th of February, she went back into the hills. You know, as I said, she was a mountain woman, she stayed in the hills, and yeah, basically came back down the next morning to a scene of devastation with the villages and the townships all set ablaze, and you know, bodies strewn about the glen floor, a pretty awful sight. And the story goes that she went to McKean's house, the clan leader, as I said, and she found his sword, and she took it down and she cast it into Loch Leven. And there she said, "So long as this sword lays undisturbed by man, no man from this glen will die by the sword again." And that prophecy was to come true, and I'll tell you a bit more about that. Oh, in a wee while, because I'm getting cold. And yeah, I need to get going to generate some heat. I'm going to put my jacket on here, get a drink, and I'll tell you more about the prophecy at the top of the hill, Stobcoil Raineach, which means hill of the evil witch Corrag. Doesn't really. I think it means hill of the Corrie of the Bracken or something like that, but that sounded better, doesn't it, for this story? Right, jacket on. Oh, it's getting claggier than claggier. Never know, might get lucky. Might get lucky in the view from the summit. Stranger things have happened. Right, this is the steep part. This is the part I do know. Let's do it. From the Bealach, the final slopes up to Stobcoil Raineach summit steepen considerably, and as I gained that last wee bit of height, the winds picked up, the cloud came in, and it was pretty stormy and pretty unpleasant. But I battled on, and before long I was approaching the summit of the Munro. Oh, it's breezy. Here's the summit. Stop there, Caoineag. Let me see if I can get a bit of shelter down here. Woo. Behind the cairn, I'll tell you about the prophecy. Woo, this is breezy, check the clouds moving. Wow, right. Let's get down here. Oh man. Hopefully you can hear me. So get a wee bit of shelter behind the cairn here, right? Oh. Yeah, I'm not going to be staying up here too long. Anyway, so the prophecy was that Corrag, when she threw the sword into the loch, said that no man from the glen would die in any, or by the hand of a sword, so in battle, should that sword be untouched by man. And the Battle of Culloden came and went. There was no casualties from Glen Coe. The Waterloo and Balaclava came. No casualties from Glen Coe. Then, in 1916, a dredger was being used to widen and deepen the channel to allow warships into Loch Leven, and during the dredging, they came across the handle of a sword, and the dredgermen who did this and found it knew nothing about the prophecy, and they took it in that night to the Ballyhoolish pub and told everyone about it. And of course the locals were shocked. They knew all about this prophecy, and they took the handle off them, ran back out and threw it straight back into the loch, hoping that the prophecy would remain. However, the next day the Battle of the Somme started, and 7 soldiers from Glen Coe were killed during that battle the following day. So that's the story of the prophecy. Really sad, and there's more to it, but you know what, I'll tell you more about that when I'm back down in the glen, because it is pretty wild up here, and there is rain forecast and snow, believe it or not, hence why I've got the ice axe. So let's drop back down, get a bit more comfortable, and I'll tell you more about Corrag and our other prophecies. Well, let's go. Woo. This is wild. Oh, right, I've dropped down just below the Bealach, and relatively speaking, it's a lot calmer here than it was up on the top of Caoineag. And yeah, the cloud seems to have got a bit thicker actually. Anyway, right, on to the second prophecy. So what else did Corrag the Witch state? She stated that should the Narrows on Loch Leven ever be bridged, there'd be a massive flood that would wipe out Glen Coe. I don't know why I'm laughing, because the last prophecy came true, but the locals and the builders, when they built the bridge at Ballyhoolish, which is at the Narrows, they were aware of this prophecy, and apparently they didn't actually complete the bridge. There's a bolt that they purposely left out, or there's a bit of it where they purposely didn't finish, just to, just to try and stop this prophecy from happening. And so far, Glen Coe has not been wiped out by a flood. So there you go. There's more to Corrag, and there's more to the story. But again, I'm going to drop back down. I do need to get back to the van. I've not told you the reason why I got up so early, but I will do when I get back to the van, and I'll tell you the last bit about Corrag, and also a wee bit more about the massacre of Glencoe. Right, let's drop back down and get on the good path. So, old Corrag had done her best to warn the MacDonalds of the impending disaster, and years later when she passed, the clan, who by that point had resettled back into the glen, I'll come on to that a bit more in a wee while, but they decided that when she passed, whether it was due to the fear of her powers or as a mark of respect, they wanted to bury her on the island where they buried all their clan chiefs. Even McKean was buried there, I think. Anyway, I think it's called Eilean Mooney, or Eilean something. Anyway, it's an island just offshore on Loch Leven. And when they went to take her body over there to bury her, a fierce storm appeared very quickly and stopped the boat from sailing, and they tried another 4 times to get across, and every time they loaded the body onto the boat, the waves would pick up and the crossing would be impossible. So they saw that as a mark, as a sign, because witches weren't meant to be buried on sacred, hallowed ground. So she was buried in a shallow grave on the shoreline. She was buried on the shoreline near Ballyhoolish at the graveyard there. God, I'm just going to get a layer off because it's starting to get warm. But even that wasn't the end of the story. It was an unmarked grave. But apparently they knew exactly where it was because no vegetation would grow on that spot. And the story continues, because when they were building the main road through there, when they went to clear the spot where she was buried, there was a major landslide, and it was said that apparently, I think maybe one of the construction workers lost their lives there. So the story goes. So yeah, there we go. That's Corrag, the story about Corrag the Witch. There is another myth or the legend about a Caoineag or a washerwoman, which I'll come on to, which I think might be linked. This could be an exclusive. This might be the first time this has never been said, but I think there might be a link between the Caoineag and Corrag the Witch. I'll explain all in a wee while. Right, let's get this top off. Getting a bit warm now. Oh. Right, so what was the final part of the story? So, what the Caoineag was a nymph or a spirit, a woman's spirit that couldn't be seen but could be heard. And they used to wail and scream and cry when there was an impending disaster or a death. And what happened on the night of the 12th, the night before the massacre, is that they reckon a few of the macdonalds got away because they heard the Caoineag crying and wailing as a warning of what was coming the next morning, and they fled the night before and got away. My theory is, because Corrag would have known, they would have known about the Caoineag and the washerwoman, that was she doing the wailing to pre-warn them and maybe get some of them to leave? Who knows? You heard it first here. Well, we're not too far away from the van, but before we get to the van, before I end the video, whoa, it's windy down here now. I'll give you one more update. I'll maybe give you a synopsis of what happened after the massacre. And yeah, did King William, did he achieve his goals? I'll let you know what I think from the limited knowledge I have of the history around about that time in a wee while. Right, let's get down a bit further. So as we approach the end of the walk, but we're actually at the head of Glen Coe here. This is the mountain I was up behind me, Stobcoil Ranick, and I'd actually chosen that because it gives a good view down in clear weather from the top into Glen Coe and how narrow it is. So had the troops arrived over the Devil's Staircase and come down and blocked the top of the glen in time, I think there would be many more that wouldn't have escaped. But there's also theories about that, whether the armies or the garrisons that came over purposefully left it late to allow people to escape. We'll never know. But anyway, so did it work? Did King William and the Scottish government, did they get what they needed by doing the massacre? Well, as I mentioned before, there was maybe 400 or 500 people in the glen, and although 38 were officially found and killed, I mean, it was brutal, and it wasn't just men, it was women and children, and many more in the that were lost to the elements. It could have been a lot worse had the garrisons come in and closed the glen off as they were meant to, and had they not had the warning from good old Corrag, the witch, and the Caoineag. Maybe, I don't know, these are just myths and legends, but word soon spread about the massacre, and even though you think about it hundreds of years ago, 1692, it was still a brutal thing to happen, and these things did happen throughout the course of Scottish history, you know, clan warfare, but this wasn't clan warfare, this was the government attacking its own people, and I think it Obviously there was no internet or no telly or radio or what have you, but the word soon got out, and I think it first came out, from what I read, in Paris, where King James was, and yeah, it soon became a political tool. And I think by the time he died, King William died in 1702, and he was pretty well disliked across Scotland, and part of that was due to the massacre of Glen Coe, and of course we still talk about it till this day. So I don't think it had its desired effect. In fact, it probably had the opposite effect. And the MacDonalds, obviously, they came back and resettled in the Glen, and yeah, so there we go. Something different on this video. I hope you've enjoyed it. I've enjoyed the walk. The walk itself has been fantastic. It's always lovely to go up a new way. I've never been up that way. It's a lot quieter, and the reason that I did it so early was, one, I've got to get to the football. I've said to my friends I'm going to go to the football with them, so hopefully I can get back in time for that. Also, it was going to be quieter going this way, but the other reason I left so early was I was hoping to get a sunrise shot of the sun had come up, but it was just too cloudy when the sun came up, so I didn't get that. So yeah, stay safe out there. Hope you've enjoyed this one, and I'll see you next week for another video. Right, to the football we go. See you next week.